Could ARK 2 end up being the greatest and most unique survival game of all time? What can we expect from such an ambitious sequel to ARK? And is it going to be too ambitious? How's it going? I'm Clutch Outlaw, and in this video I'm going over what is currently known about the gameplay as well as some lore details for ARK 2. I'm going to be breaking it down, making theories and predictions of what we can possibly expect from this ARK sequel, in addition to what this could mean for the current game itself. So go ahead, sit back, relax, drop a like on the video, and let's get it. Every aspect of the ARK series is being rethought and redesigned. This is basically as it reads. This means from taming, building, fighting, and pretty much everything ARK currently has to offer is being reworked for ARK 2. Wildcard is making ARK 2 what they wanted ARK 1 to be, essentially. In fact, this was officially stated by the founders of Wildcard in a recent community crunch, which outlines what is supposed to be in ARK 2. And as I read through this, I couldn't help but get very hyped and very skeptical at the same time, mainly because of Wildcard's track record in the past of announcing things that constantly get delayed due to some sort of hiccup or bump in the road. But I can somewhat look past that because I've done enough research to understand that ARK was basically developed in around 7 to 8 months with shitty code, a buttload of tech debt, and they didn't expect the game would have been as well received as it was. But ARK 2 is starting from scratch in the newest Unreal Engine, with much better coding and a larger, more talented team of developers at that. I don't think what they end up doing performance-wise with ARK 2 will be as big of an issue compared to ARK 1, mainly for that reason. But it doesn't mean that the game will be a masterpiece either, at least maybe not upon release, given it's going to be an early access title just like ARK 1 was. And don't get me wrong, releasing ARK 2 in early access is a good idea for Wildcard because that gives them more cushion for failure and improvement, so to speak. But this also leads me to think that ARK 2 is going to be pretty janky for the first year or so of early access. Other than rethinking and redesigning everything that makes ARK, as long as they can keep a good taste in the player's mouth when it comes to the things that everyone loves about ARK. I get that Wildcard is trying to break new grounds within the survival genre with ARK 2, but as imperfect as ARK 1 currently is, it's still addicting as all hell. So to summarize, I'm basically saying Wildcard doesn't really need to rethink and redesign every aspect of the game. They need to keep the things that make ARK and slap them into ARK 2, point blank. Don't overthink it. Of course, I'm sure it's not that easy, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. Because nowadays, whenever a game developer promises something in a game that sounds almost too good to be true, or in other words, overly ambitious, players can't help but to be somewhat skeptical until they can experience and stress test it firsthand. But if Wildcard delivers the redesigned and rethought aspects of ARK in a tasteful manner, I personally overall would hope for it to be well optimized, especially in comparison to ARK 1. Because if ARK 2 ends up being as poorly optimized as ARK 1 is, I'm not so sure everyone's storage is going to have enough lube for the download of this game. But hey, we can only hope. And so it says ARK 2 will have an epic story. If you've already been following ARK news, you'll know that the stars of the show are going to be none other than famous actors of the Car Go Fast series, Skim Beeble and his daughter, the Brick. Experience an epoch-spanning adventure as he seeks to protect his daughter, Mika, from the ghosts of an ancient past and visions of a new future. Lore junkies, feel free to fact check me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe I remember it was said that the storyboard and ARK as a whole was originally set to end after the Extinction DLC, but the community said nay. Wildcard noticed we were far from being done with ARK, and then we eventually got Gen 1 and 2, the most story-heavy maps to be added to ARK 1. Which kind of makes it clear that ARK 2 probably wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the continuation of the lore and the community. Because unless they were planning to make some kind of ARK 1 remaster or remake in Unreal 5, I don't know how well that would work out for the longevity of the ARK franchise. But now, where will this lead the overall story of ARK 2 though? I can't say for sure, and the animated series that's coming out this year may fill in some dark spots for us. But from what we know so far, we can speculate the story isn't going to be told with just collectibles and the environment anymore, since we are pretty much caught up to the same timeline as the main lore survivors by the end of Genesis Part 2. But does this mean we are going to be getting cutscenes to an optional main story that follows Vin Diesel's character, Santiago? That's what I'm kind of thinking may happen, although I hope it doesn't personally. But what do you think Santiago means when he says this?
Lights out, old friend.
Now, who is he directing this towards? Who is he talking to? It could be anybody or anything, but I personally believe he could be saying goodbye to either himself as a series of numbers and multiple clones, so that when he dies, he doesn't respawn. Or he could be saying goodbye to tech and element overall, which according to lore, Santiago was heavily involved in the creation of, as well as the weaponry that brought disaster to Earth during a war between two factions at the time. Apparently that's why Extinction looks the way it does. He could be deeply regretful for it. So does this mean we will get a story that involves an optional main quest to eradicate the remaining remnants of tech in order to preserve this newfound world and mankind's evolution without it? Or will it be a story about drifting dinosaurs with your family? I'll go with the first option, but I'm sure Wildcard will embrace the meme along the way. Fully stackable user-created mods for new creatures, items, gameplay, and maps that can be created and shared cross-platform. This is going to be great. I personally haven't dabbled much in the world of ARK mods and unofficial servers, but I know this will be great for the development of the game because there are so many talented mod creators out there that are just chomping at the bit to get their hands on ARK 2 assets in Unreal Engine 5. And it will do nothing but improve the quality of the game. And the fact that it will be cross-platform is a huge game changer as well. I'm glad that Wildcard is still going to embrace the fact that mods do make games better for the player experience. I just hope to see that they will continue to sponsor certain mods that could improve the vanilla game upon full release. Because as I go over the later details of the game, it will somewhat make you think that they may leave most, if not all, the improvements made to the game up to the community itself. It would also be nice to have the new creature selection polls make a reappearance for ARK 2 as new dinos get released as well. But overall, I'm pretty interested to see what mods end up being recreated with ARK 2 assets. Best in class third person only gameplay. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks this will be a major deviation from the things that make ARK, because having access to first person camera view is what helps make a game more immersive. Also, first person was available in ARK 1 before third person, and Steve from Nooblets.com said it best in my opinion. In his video covering his thoughts on ARK 2, he basically says, being able to look up at these large creatures in first person helps remind you how small you really are in that world compared to these giant creatures. I'll give the benefit of the doubt since it's going to be in early access. First person may come at a later time, but not from the developers. Because in the Wildcard founder message, when they go on to talk about adding mod compatibility, they pretty much say they will be leaving the first person mode to the mod creators themselves. So I guess it's not like it isn't going to be in the game at all. Just not in vanilla, I guess. Now let's talk about mantling, free climbing, parkour, sliding, and swinging. Sounds cool on paper, but this just makes me think Wildcard is trying too hard to compete with survival games that already have free climbing and parkour. It's the first thing that comes to my mind as overly ambitious. They do say they are taking inspiration from games like Assassin's Creed and Breath of the Wild when it comes to this climbing system. Both good games, both good climbing systems, but I can't help but think this is one of the main reasons ARK 2 won't have first person upon release. Because it's probably a whole different dynamic when trying to develop parkour gameplay in first person. So the go-to ideal competitor in the survival genre against ARK that has incorporated things like building, taming, and parkour is Conan Exiles. And other than the fact that you can create a character with a long dong, you can pretty much climb and scale anything. But as far as parkour, sliding, and swinging goes, is this really even necessary for ARK 2? I mean, if you need to get somewhere you can't reach, just tame a flying mount. Kind of a no-brainer. But if Wildcard ends up pulling this off in a tasteful and fun way, then so be it. But it sounds overly ambitious to me. Unless their main goal with keeping it third person and adding the parkour aspects to gameplay is to show that we will be more capable without tamed creatures in comparison to ARK 1, that I'm unsure of. But let me know what you think. Now, speaking of overly ambitious concepts coming to ARK 2, Souls-like melee combat. I can already tell the PvP community is beyond skeptical about this being in the game. And now I don't play enough PvP to be able to speak for the whole community entirely, but this could kill the experience for a majority of ARK's PvP fanbase, given ARK 1 has first person, guns, and explosives, which would classify it as a first person shooter with dinosaurs. But this drastic shift of not having the elements of an FPS may not make ARK 2's PvP as engaging for those players. And since ARK 2 is most likely going to have only primitive based weaponry and tactics, this could also mean a slower pace in combat. Is this what they had originally wanted ARK 1 to be? Target locking, blocks, dodges, combos, staggers, and special attacks. Again, sound cool on paper, but I feel they are trying too hard to replicate mechanics from other games that probably shouldn't be in ARK. But now let's speculate from a PvE standpoint. There are going to be hostile NPC called Aratai that have their own tamed creatures. So picture this. You're running around on foot collecting berries or whatnot, and then you come across an Aratai on the back of a raptor or even a Rex. Are we going to be able to target lock and fight the mounted Rex like a Dark Souls boss? Or if we see it before it sees us, can we set up a trap or ambush to make it easier to take out? That could be something. But let's go a little deeper with this. What if the Souls-like combat doesn't just apply to when you're fighting? What if this applies to when you're taming as well? If ARK 2 does decide to keep the knockout taming system, I could see firing trank arrows into a wild creature all the while dodging, strafing, and reading its movement patterns. Also, once the dino is tamed, will the Souls-like combat even extend to the tamed dinosaur itself? Obviously, I don't see a Rex spamming the roll button like in the Soulsborne franchise, but imagine you're riding your Rex and you cross paths with either a wild or another mounted enemy dinosaur. You lock onto each other and engage in what could be something like a turf war from Monster Hunter. As epic as that sounds, it could be a little too deep down the rabbit hole for what ARK 2 has in store for this new combat system. We shall see. But they clearly say in the community crunch that there's supposed to be visceral attacks and it's supposed to feel very impactful whenever you're fighting something on a mounted dinosaur. I, for one, would love for there to be some kind of optional cinematic execution sequence for tamed dinos when fighting an enemy. Something like if you got the thing you're fighting down to, let's say, 1 bite or a percentage of HP left, you can have an option prompt to perform a gnarly execution. That would be pretty rad in my opinion. I have hopes that we will see dino combat in our first gameplay trailer to come in ARK 2, so fingers crossed. A component-based crafting system that will have millions of combinations that change the look and function of your gear as well as your items. Interesting, right? I'll just go ahead and say right now that there most likely isn't going to be millions of combinations for different gear and items in early access of the game, but I'm not saying it isn't going to happen at all either, just highly unlikely upon release in my opinion. Now what can we expect from this new crafting system though? Many ARK players know that ARK 1 has somewhat of a simplistic crafting system when it comes to progression. You start being able to craft stone tools and cloth gear, then level up to being able to make metal tools and flak armor. Of course, endgame being tech gear after killing bosses, and then that's it. But a component-based crafting system with many different unique crafting possibilities sounds like a pretty big step in the right direction for ARK 2. There will most likely be access to weapons and gear that can be crafted from different variations of bones, hide, metal, stone, fauna, gems even. Everything, so to speak. But depending on what it is and the quality of the item that you'd like to craft, you may be required to gather large bones or small bones, hide from a specific creature, or even a rare kind of metal or gem. I'm pretty certain this is the direction they will attempt to go with ARK 2's crafting system in order to keep it engaging. But of course, let's go a little deeper with this. The thought of having access to a large array of different kinds of materials to craft with may lead one to think that ARK 2 will be adopting a Minecraft type of system here. But hear me out. When I type in component-based crafting system into Google, the top listing after the suggested YouTube videos is a Dungeons & Dragons forum that pitches a fan-made crafting system. I don't intend to compare D&D to what's to come in ARK 2, mainly because I don't know enough about D&D, but after reading the forum, it got me thinking in the direction of enchantment, so to speak. I know Minecraft has an enchantment system, and no, I don't think they will be bringing magic or spellbending to ARK, but we are going to be on a completely foreign planet, and who knows what kinds of resources there will be at our disposal to augment or enhance our gear with. For example, a dangerously poisonous plant or creature that gives a poisonous resource that you can then coat the edges of your weapons with. See where I'm going with this? And it probably wouldn't just apply to poison either. There could be fire, tranquilizing, possibly even bleed enhancements that could be made to items, including saddles maybe? Of course, that's only speculation. But this Rex being whipped around like Skim Beeble's 1970 Dodge Charger in the movie Cargo Fast has a saddle that is equipped with spikes towards its snout. What if you can then apply poison to these spikes? I'll just leave it at that because a poisonous Rex sounds kind of broken, but I will say I believe they might implement saddle variations. This one shown being a hide and bone type of saddle with a specific armor rating. There may end up being a metal variation as well with an even higher armor rating. Basically just like how there is a tech saddle variant for certain creatures in ARK 1. All in all, the thought of a rewarding and engaging crafting system coming to ARK 2 sounds awesome. I just hope it isn't another overly ambitious concept for Wildcard though. I'm sure there's so much I could hypothesize about being in the crafting system, but this seems like as healthy of a point as any to segue into the dynamic world events that are going to be implemented. Natural and unnatural occurrences are always happening across the game world, independent of your presence. Your choices whether to interact with these events will yield rewards or challenges. Now, this was also more elaborated upon in the founder's message. They said these procedurally dynamic events can consist of waterhole gatherings, wounded creatures, tracking advanced prey, stampedes, defending creatures in exchange for their trust, and escort missions. And each event can yield unique rewards and challenges. Sounds like what Wildcard was trying to do with the Genesis missions was kind of a play to introduce these world events in a way to let us know that they would be taking ARK in this direction. But what I'm most curious about is what kind of unique rewards are we talking about here? A rare crafting item? A temporary status buff? Blueprints? Maybe an autographed stone hatchet from Vin Diesel himself. Who knows? But if completing events is the main way we acquire new loot in ARK 2, this leads me to believe they could be implying world events to be the new loot drops. Also, a little off track, would they get rid of blueprints in exchange for something else in ARK 2? Controversial, I know, but I've been thinking about this since the crafting system section of the video, wondering if Wildcard would do this. Blueprints are a staple in ARK 1, and it would be sad to see them go. It's always a small dopamine hit when you'd open a loot crate and get a really good Ascendant BP, especially the one in specific that you have been searching for days on end. Of course, until you see how many resources are required to craft it. But with the possibility of a mass array of higher quality resources, would blueprints even be needed in ARK 2? Maybe they will keep the crafting skill as an upgradable perk, and then it could be leveled up in order to make stronger, more durable weapons and armor. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this. Now, I realize I got a little off track there, but unpredictable world events sounds like it could be an interesting addition to the game. It could also leave room for holiday-themed events, another ARK staple. I feel as if though ARKaholics would riot in the streets if they didn't get their holiday events in ARK 2. And with it being in Unreal Engine 5, I could see events like during Winter Wonderland the entire map gets dusted with a layer of snow or something. Or you escort one of Raptor Claus's lost reindeer back to him in exchange for a present or something like that. Things like this keep the game lighthearted and festive. And it's kind of hard to picture ARK without holiday events anymore. So basically, if I'm not misunderstanding things, it sounds like the main purpose for the new world event system is to keep us more on our toes. Whether or not we choose to work together as players on a single server for a common goal, or battle it out in PvP for whatever reward the event gives us is optional. I wouldn't be too surprised if they tried to implement weather disasters as well, kind of like the heat waves from Scorched Earth and the earthquakes from Aberration. Only time will tell. Template building and sharing. Instance rendering and network streaming enable much higher client and server performance for large player-built structures and a longer draw distance. You can set up and save your own preferred building template, share them, and place prospective template layouts in the world to then build them out as a team. Freakishly large, outdated box builders rejoice. The days of waiting for your box full of uncried gigas, rexes, crabs, and space dolphins to load upon render is over. they will now do so instantly. At least that's what I believe they mean by instance rendering. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but we won't have to wait for each individual structure to load in upon entering render distance. It's not much of a problem in single player and low latency servers of course, but if you haven't played on a highly populated official PvE server, this can be kind of annoying. And if you've ever gotten stuck in a ceiling or foundation as a base you didn't know was there starts loading in all around you, then you got trapped in said base with no way out, you may know what I'm talking about. So yeah, this is pretty big news for the building community of ARK, considering it seems like they want to promote the building of larger, more ambitious structures within the game world. And the possibility that we may be able to do more than just share pictures and videos of our own personalized builds. We can make shareable templates, which I believe is meant as uploading building blueprints that can be then downloaded and placed as an outline for someone else to build. If Wildcard executes this well, I love this idea. But if I'm wrong about this being uploadable, then I can interpret it as being a function to share the schematics with your tribe mates so they can help build the base in unison. Out of all the things ARK has to offer, I'd say building is the thing I tend to enjoy the most, which is why I'm usually the one building the bases for the tribe. But there are times where the builder doesn't want to build the entire base himself, you know? Which I think is why prospective template layouts could be a good idea for the entire tribe to get involved in building together. And if you've ever played the game The Forest, then built anything, you'll notice before you build anything, it leaves an outline of the structure and what is required in order to place it. This means the entire tribe would be able to see what each other is trying to build, then come to an agreement if building it would be a good addition to the base or not. All in all, I have high hopes for the building system in ARK 2. Sensory-based AI. No more omnipresent radar. Creatures now track and hunt by sight, sound, and smell. I perceive this as dinosaurs and creatures in ARK will no longer be mindless roaming AI that are easily outwitted. This means that there is going to be more to actually be intimidated by when we encounter dinosaurs and creatures in ARK 2, compared to getting spotted by an aggressive dino within a certain range and being able to either outrun or get it stuck on something, or as well as getting its attention focused on a nearby passive dino. We will actually have to use a lot more caution when dealing with these creatures now. We have to utilize things like actual camouflage and probably things like rocks, trees, and bushes to avoid being detected by wild creatures. We can also use concepts like masking our scent, which makes me think there will be a lot more to deal with as far as taming goes as well. Wildcard has really been experimenting with different taming techniques aside from normal knockout taming in ARK 1, which lets you know they are willing to expand the horizons on taming methods in ARK 2. I'm truly curious to see where this will lead the game performance-wise, because if the creatures in ARK 1 weren't already occupied with seeing which one of their last two chromosomes would win in a fight and their AI was actually smart, I feel like server performance would take a hard nosedive, both official and unofficial servers. But we will really have to see if everything Wildcard plans to do with their AI will make ARK 2 creatures worth it. Because if they make taming creatures too tough and tedious due to their AI being too smart, or having too many variables, it could lose some fun points for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the challenge of taming a new creature using whatever new taming method Wildcard puts out with it, just not at the cost of my mental sanity. Unless if the creature does end up having a very annoying and time-consuming taming method, make the creature actually worth it in the end. I'm almost certain Wildcard is already weighing this out because ARK wouldn't be as polarizing if not for the dinosaurs being in the game, of course. So yeah, smart dinosaurs will be a plus, adding more of a horror sensation of when being pursued by one knowing it won't be easily outplayed. And last but not least, character progression and skill system. Gain both experience points from gameplay and knowledge points by accomplishing key objectives and overcoming unique challenges to progress along a massive skill tree filled with new active abilities, perks, and passive benefits. I foresee this as not being entirely too different from the current leveling system in ARK 1. We will gain XP from playing the game, reaching a certain threshold, acquiring a level point that we can then pump into a desired skill. But we have yet to know what skills will be implemented into ARK 2 other than possibly the current main skills in ARK 1. And I can only assume what they possibly mean by knowledge points are either engram points or an all new kind of progression point system to come, involving this skill tree that they say say to be massive. But who's to say that engrams will even make it to ARK 2? Which leads me to be able to reference the first ARK 2 trailer and the tech interface that Santiago plays around with. Just by dissecting what is shown on the interface, you can see what is basically Santiago's status card or specimen implant info. It displays his name, ancestry, and even his aptitudes. He then proceeds to a security override menu, and at the bottom has engram library listed, which I took as all engrams that had been learned in ARK 1 being stored in there, unless it's only tech engrams. Who knows? But anyway, to close out the scene, he decides to purge all the info displayed on the screen. So this makes me wonder just how different will the interface for leveling yourself and dinos in ARK 2 be? Since we are going back to primitive ways, we will obviously need to learn how to make a fire, spears, armor, and tools to survive. But maybe instead of having a system where you get to pick and choose what you can craft depending on how many engram points you get from that level, they will make it to once you reach a certain level, you can craft all the things in that level tier. And as far as this new skill tree wildcard mention goes, it sounds like they will cater to the direct playstyle for each individual ARK player. Other than choosing to pump all of your attribute points into a crafting skill, then calling yourself the crafter of the tribe, you might be able to be the crafter with a percentage chance of crafting a spear that already has poison on it or something like that. Of course, I wouldn't limit it to just that, but I feel kind of inclined to theorize some of the active abilities, perks, and passive benefits that could make the experience for ARK 2 more special for the specific players and their playstyle. For example, things like a percentage decrease in how long it takes to tame something, a resource gathering buff when using a certain tool, a crit chance percentage with a specific weapon, being able to carry more structures or specific resources in your inventory, an imprinting buff to decrease the amount of times you have to imprint on a baby creature, or even immunities to potentially dangerous elements. I could go on. But this is one of the things I'd love to hear from the community on what they would want in a skill tree that isn't game breaking mainly for PvP. But yeah, essentially a skill tree that would make your experience of the gameplay more expansive would be interesting to see, especially if you can unlock the ability to see in first person. But I digress. Well, as far as what we have to go off of in terms of information about ARK 2, it's a pretty decent amount, but it's been nearly 2 years since the game's announcement in 2020 and we still don't have visual on any actual gameplay yet. So this leaves the question, when are we getting more ARK 2 news? Well, Wildcard attended the most recent PAX West event in Seattle in order to showcase a lot of new stuff about ARK's debut release to the Nintendo Switch. They also streamed some interviews with the creators of Studio Wildcard, who went on to talk about the rise of Wildcard and what they are most excited about coming to ARK 2. Of course, without any new spoilers, it seemed. Other than that, we're still pretty much in the dark here. I could take Wildcard's silence on ARK 2 at the moment as maybe, and this is a big maybe, them learning to not announce things that aren't ready to be followed up on yet, like the release date of ARK 2 being pushed back to a generalized 2023 from 2022. But Wildcard's Extra Life live streaming charity event is right around the corner on November 5th. And that is where I am almost 90% certain we will be seeing quite a bit of ARK 2 news. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about, Wildcard hosts a charity live stream event on Twitch every year for the Extra Life Kids Health Program. And the stream usually goes on for a full 24 hours. And if I'm not wrong, they will possibly give us a new ARK 2 leak every hour on the hour during the stream, just like they did with Gen 1 and 2. So I'd say place your bets that we'll most likely be seeing ARK 2 news during that live stream event on November 5th. Other than that, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about pertaining to ARK 2. And if you've made it this far, I'd like to say thanks to those who liked the video and subscribed ahead of time. I'll catch you guys in the next one.